right into line 40 here. And remember, I talked yesterday that there's no such thing as lines. The lines came later. It's all one thing. And so what we're about to do is, of course, in the context of Da Qing Long Tang, which we just did for 2 lines before. So now we're about to do Xiao Qing Long Tang. And I'm very excited about Xiao Qing Long Tang because this is a formula that we get a chance to use today if we understand how to use it. And we get to save some lives, do some great medicine, and it's a fantastic formula. I've just realized I've said all this, and then of course the 2 primary herbs you can't get in the United States, but we will come around to the workaround. As long as we understand what we're doing, we don't need those specific herbs. We need those flavors and natures and personalities of where it's going to go. Our line 40. Shang Han 表不解. So we have a Shang Han, or damage by cold, and the surface is not relieved. So, not relieved, does that mean that they've already been treated with a formula perhaps? They've had Ma Huang Tang, or they've been sick and not getting better on their own? 心下有水气. Below the heart, there is water qi. I love that description. He doesn't say water, he doesn't say all sorts of things. He says water qi. And it's below the heart. It's right here. 感呕, dry nausea. 发热而渴, emitting heat as well as cough. 或渴, or they're thirsty. 或痢, or they have diarrhea. 或噎, which is, or they're choking or having difficulty. 或小便不利, or they're having difficulty urinating with 小腹满, with a full lower abdomen. 或喘, or there's shortness of breath. 小青龙汤主之. 小青龙汤 is your principal formula to consider. And what's important here is we have water gathering in the chest. And he uses the word qi. And that water qi implies it's not necessarily physical, and yet it's physical, but what's fascinating is the lungs are in charge of water dispersal. And I talked about, I don't know where I talked about it, in what class anymore, but you've got the great thing of the fire between the kidneys, and so the Mingmen is in charge of heating the kidneys, and the water of the kidneys are in charge of water, gets steamed, and so it goes up into the air through the body, and the steam of the water of the kidneys percolates up, and it hits the tops of the lungs, which is basically a still. That's what it is. Have you ever wondered why it's metal? It's a still, right? So the fire of the kidneys is in charge of percolating that up, and it hits the tops of the lungs, it condenses. It's water qi. And then the lungs spread it everywhere through the body. And at some point I went on a major rant, and I don't know if it's made the snippets or in what seminar it is anymore, but if the fire in the kidneys, the Mingmen is too weak, then the water doesn't get steamed up. And if the fire between the lungs, what is the fire between the lungs? It's your heart. And then you start seeing this really cool picture of 2 things with fire below and 2 things with fire above. And then you start thinking, wait, kidneys and heart connection. And then you start going, oh, it's a fire. This needs to be warm, not get cold. This needs to be warm, not get too hot. And so this is in charge of being warm enough to distill up the waters, and this is in charge, the heart, of not being so hot that it harasses the lungs, and then the lungs no longer condense the water from qi back to water and spread through the body. But of course, what happens if this isn't strong enough, or the fire isn't strong enough in the heart? Then the water coagulates, assembles in the lungs. Basically, Xiao Qing Long Tang can be used to treat many things, but it is flat out the number 1 formula for pneumonia. This is it. Someone says pneumonia, and every person who knows the Shang Han Lun will look up and say, oh, Xiao Qing Long Tang. And in our situation, it's also great for a patient base that we will see in the West is walking pneumonia. And the number of times, the nice thing about China is that you get to see pneumonia. We get to see that. And every single time, 24 hours later, instead of getting worse, they're suddenly better. It's that formula, and it's that fast, and it's that clear. Now, does that mean 24 hours later they're better? No, they're still sick. They are no longer sick negative. They are sick positive, going to the better direction. But I mean, it's one of these knee-jerk reactions. Pneumonia, oh, Xiao Qing Long Tang. Xiao case了, as the Chinese say, no problem. And so I love this formula because so many years ago, and when you're just going out, Julianne talked yesterday about having that night where you wake up or you can't fall asleep because you wonder if your patient's going to be dead. You took the risk, you gave them the formula, and then you think, oh, and you come up with every reason what you got wrong. For me, many years ago, it was really nasty pneumonia and gurgling, and pneumonia can kill you. And Xiao Qing Long Tang was given, and I had one of those nights where I was like, and the next day they were like, wow, what did you do? I didn't do anything. Xiao Qing Long Tang did something. So I love this formula. We have Shang Han, so it's damaged by cold. The surface is not relieved from whatever we're doing. We've got this water qi. We've got an accumulation of fluids below there. And so that pneumonia, if it's really severe and it's going to get bad, it's going to give you heart failure. This is serious. And then you've got dry nausea. Dry nausea. Why put in the word dry? Remember, carving on bamboo is a pain in the butt. So why go in here? We've had O in a whole bunch of places. O. Nausea, retching, nausea, vomiting. Whatever you want to add to it. We've got this nausea, but it's dry. We have water qi, but it's not in the stomach. If it was in the stomach, they'd be vomiting fluids. They would have something to vomit. And so by saying there's water qi and then dry, we know that water qi is going to be in the lungs, in the sides. It's not in the stomach. Because it's xinxia, it's below the heart, i.e. it's the solar plexus, which is the stomach. In so many cases when we see xinxia, it's referring to the stomach. And so here we've got gan o, we do not have water that's going to come out. Fa re, they've got heat. Please remember, Shang Han, damaged by cold, does not mean they are cold. They will be cold with heat, if it's in the yang layers, or they're cold all the way through. Also, I certainly would have talked about it the very first time we talked about the Shang Han Lun, which is there's the Jai Yi, the narrow definition of Shang Han, damaged by cold, and the broad definition of damaged by cold. And the broad definition of damaged by cold includes all the heat illnesses that you would find in the Wenbing, the febrile diseases. So if you look at the Nanjing definitions, the Neijing, all of that, Shang Han does not mean damage by cold. It's a broad category that includes cold and heat damage. And then there's the narrow, which is what we're talking about here. Bang, they get hit by the cold. But the cold goes in, and you have heat even though they are cold. And cough. So we've got cough. And then we have all these ors. The ors are huge. Julianne today introduced the first of our ors for her, which was in Xiao Chai Hu Tang. All of these ors. Here is going to be really important because we're going to see that slot machine go crazy with all the herbs we're going to have in these ors. Or thirsty, or diarrhea, or literally choking. And that choking there is like... That was actually pretty good. That's yeah. That was lovely. That was yeah. Okay? Difficulty urinating with a full lower abdomen. Julianne did a great job of talking about all the different ways we might have difficulty in urination. You've sweat them, and there's no water in the body, so they're not going to pee. There's no water to pee, but they also won't have a full lower abdomen. If they should pee, but it's blocked, they'll be full lower abdomen with pain. If it's a problem of the water mechanism, so there is urine and it fills in the abdomen, then you've got these different mechanisms, all of them difficulty of urination. But we can't just throw herbs that course the urination, so you can't throw in just juling and fooling and daqiancao and all these pee herbs just because they don't pee. You have to see why they're not peeing. And so we have this idea of the fullness or shortness of breath. Xiao Qing Long Tang is our formula. Chen Wu Ji, Shang Han Biao Bu Jie. So we have damage by cold, the surface unrelieved. Xin Xia You Shui Yin, Beneath the heart, there is water. And he doesn't use water qi, he uses literally fluids, water fluids. 自水寒降薄. Now this bo character, 降薄, is something that you'll see in a lot of the old doctors who write their formulas. Traditionally, when you write a formula, you don't just write the herbs. You write the patient's name, they write the basic information, and then it's 理法方药. So you have to write what they had, what is the reason they have it. So you can say yin deficiency, you could say water qi, and then you will describe all the symptoms and what's happened in the case history that leads you to, that supports it. And then you will say this is the formula that I'm going to plan to use, and then you will actually write the formula with the modifications that are appropriate for this. And so it was a way of making sure that in the old days, if you weren't sure, if you suspected the doctor had killed somebody, it was the doctor's fault, you could look at the piece of paper, see what they said the patient had, what they were doing to back up those words, what proved their statement, and then look at the formula and then look at the herbs and say, they said this, but the symptoms were off. This was a bad diagnosis. They said this, the symptoms were correct, but that's the totally wrong formula. They don't know their own classics, right? Or they got it right, they said it right, that's the right formula, and then they added fuzhe because they were afraid, they wanted to give a little help to the sweat to the guizhi because the patient was cold. I'm not making that one up. We had that last time where at the very end, when there's the whole talk with the teacher, and the teacher says, yes, well, this patient was given fuzhe along with guizhi tao. How did you know? You saw this, this, this. And so you were concerned, so you threw in fuzhe, but the fuzhe helped the guizhi push out the sweat so much that they were wang yang, that the yang was exhausted or depleted or killed. And therefore they had all these problems that then we had to undo with gancao ganjiang tang, and then gancao shaoyao tang, and then we needed to go through Xiao Qing tiaowei chengqi tang, all of those. So this idea of everything is right, and then just to make sure you added one herb, and it goes wrong. Or as Julianne was saying earlier, you do all of this and then you're a classic scholar, so you put in shengjiang, dazao, gancao. Help the middle every time. Or you're worried about the strength of your herbs, so every formula gets gancao because you think it harmonizes. Right? Or I heard a story once about a doctor in Taiwan who was convinced that since everybody ate too much rich food in today's world and didn't exercise enough, that every patient got Baohuan variation. Baohuan, famous formula, right? Baohuan variation in their formula. But if you did not need live fuzhe, if you did not need radish seeds to purge you through and get that block, and you didn't have that, woe be to that poor patient who, before being able to be built, got hit with a very descending, strong formula. And yet every single patient got it because of a belief. So you can start, that's what that was all about, was does it make sense, and can I support it? So should something go wrong, then we can see whether it was my fault or something happened. Or if it went right, I can see what we did, and my students or whoever follows can look at what I said and do that. Ye Tianshi, one of the great, great practitioners of the warm febrile school, what makes him so great today is we have his case histories. So he's got that written out. What was going on, what happened, and then here's a formula. And it's be so incredible if we have those. Case histories are great when we start doing that. Okay, so we have this Xiangbo. This all was launched by this Bo. And so the Shang Han scholar, old doctors, will often use this Xiangbo. And Xiangbo here means that they fight together. But it doesn't mean fight cancel out. It's when wind meets cold, you get wind chill. And so everything is worse. The wind feels worse and the cold feels worse. And so they agitate each other, or they hit each other, or it makes more chaos, more bad situation. And so here we have water and cold hitting each other and getting worse. So it's that really cold, damp, dank day. It's the fog in San Francisco. It's the fog in London where just it feels zappingly cold because there's water and cold working together to really sap all of your yang out. And if the yang goes, water accumulates. And since we're accumulating not in the stomach and not in the lower limbs, we're not seeing edema, we're seeing water here, the pneumonia is going to go, and the more the water goes, the less fire there is, the worse the pneumonia becomes until the patient goes or ends up in the hospital. So This 相搏 is the idea that they fight, but they agitate each other and make it worse. And that's what that means. 肺凉, so the lungs have gone cold. 这伤肺, so then the lungs are obviously damaged. 一起凉寒相感, because the water and the cold have mixed with each other or affected each other. 中外界伤, and thus we have damage to the middle and the outside. So we have the cold that's damaging the outside, and we have the water that's damaging the middle. Now he said purposely middle and outside. He didn't say inside. And so often Cheng Wuji will say inside goes deficient, outside is excess there. He's giving us a very specific location because we do not have anything on the inside, the organs, the GI tract. Right? And so we have this idea, and it's come, and then remember, for the Shang Han Lun and for all of this, Y also implies head to chest. And then chest is middle to below chest, and then low is diaphragm, GI tract, all of that. Which is how I said last time I talked about how some people looked at this obvious thing of when it's Taiyang, it's up in the head. When it's Shaoyang, it's in the chest. You'll see every single time there's rib, there's below the rib, there's below the diaphragm, there's diaphragm pain. And every time it's Yangmin, there's something in the GI tract or the stomach. And so they were like, oh, that's easy. That's Shangjiao, Zhongjiao, Xiajiao. And suddenly you've got 3-jiao differentiation. And then other people looked at Ma Huang, and they said, oh, there's aches everywhere, and so it's all through the body, and so there's a problem with the Wei Qi. And then they say there's heat, and the heat might be above, below, but there's heat and no fear of that. And so then they say it's qi heat, it's everywhere. And then they say, oh, no, the heat is now in the nutritive layer. And so you're starting to see problems of that. And that's yin layer. And then when it's really, really bad, it's in the blood. And that's wei qi yin xue, or I don't know what they call it in English. Defense qi, whatever. Wei qi yin xue, right? You guys got that. And so that's where those people came up with it, was looking at the Shang Han Lin and going, oh, that's really obvious, because Ma Huang, you can have aches everywhere. So you wouldn't just say it's upper jiao. So we've got all of this. Let's see. So they have gone together, and now the middle and the outside all have damage. Gu, therefore, thus, qi ni er shang xing, the qi has gone the wrong direction, and it is going upward. Ci zhi wei ye. This is what we're talking about. Yu Xiao Qing Long Tang. We want to use Xiao Qing Long Tang. Fa Han San Shui. To push out sweat and to disperse the water. Shui qi nei zi. Now this is an important character. The water qi on the inside is zi. And this zi character, if we look it up or we get to know it, it means steep, it means soak, it has this idea. But really, if you go into the old books, this was the character that meant flood water on low-lying land. What does that mean? That means it doesn't go away. And it's not a marsh. Marsh would involve more water. It's sludge, which is pneumonia. And so the waters come in, the land is low, so the water's got nowhere to go, and the sun's not coming out because it's constantly gray, and the next thing you know, you're in Amsterdam. Sorry. Les Pays-Bas, huh? Okay, so in the Low Countries, which as a child always confused me because they're rather high up on the map, but that's exactly what's going on, is the water just doesn't go away because there's no warmth, there's no sun, and we've got damage by cold doing that. So we've got this. 自所传不一. Now because the waters have gone and they've just settled into the area, now where that water goes, lots of places. It could affect many places. So you're not going to have one symptom because as the Tao Te Ching tells us, water is the one thing that goes everywhere. As we all know, water goes everywhere. So, 故有火痿之症. And that is why we have so many or symptoms. So, or this, or that. What has the water done? The water's gone in, it's accumulated, and then where did it settle? Did it settle high, settle low, settle left, settle right? And that creates all these or symptoms. And so, following these symptoms, we have our damage. 以结化者. So we have to relieve and transform. 化, transform. This is what we must do. And that's Xiao Qing Long Tao. So what are we looking at? We're looking at Ma Huang. And we've got 3 liang of Ma Huang. We're looking at Shao Yao. We've got 3 liang of Shao Yao. We're looking at Wu Wei Zi, sour. And we've got half a sheng there. So we've got sour warm here. Okay? So normally whenever our eye happens to see Guizhi and Shao Yao in a formula, we now trained to start looking around and seeing where's the sour herb. Did they need to remove the sour herb? Because obviously I've got Guizhi Tang in here, but moved around. So I've got Guizhi Tang, and I say, ooh, look at that. Wu Wei is sour, and Guizhi Tang has sour, but it's warm. Because cold sour, cool sour would be bad in a cold water situation. We don't want to nourish the yin and restrain and cool. We need to gather, but it's got to be warm instead. So I'm hopping ahead here, but if you look at that, that's what we're looking at. We've got Ma Huang, Shao Yao, Wu Wei Zi, sour warm, Ganjiang, dry ginger, 3 liang, which is acrid hot. We've got Gancao, 3 liang again. We've got Xixin, 3 liang again, 3 liang. We've got Guizhi, 3 liang. We've got Banxia, and we've got that half sheng in there, and it's acrid and slightly warm. And then we stop ourselves and we say, okay, Andrew's just made a huge point, which is not Andrew. It's if you look at these formulas and there weren't that many herbs that you were using in those days and you had the whole slot idea of how to rearrange based on flavor and nature, what do we have in here? Well, do we basically have Ma Huang Tang? I mean, Da Qing Long Tang, I pointed out how it's basically Ma Huang Tang and Guizhi Tang mixed with variation. Do we have Ma Huang Tang? Well, we've got Ma Huang, we've got Guizhi, we've got Gancao, but we're missing Xingren. Are we missing Xingren? We're missing the herb known as Xingren, but we're not missing the function of lowering, Banxia. And so we need to have it a bit more warming, and we need to be descending the qi, but we don't need the Xingren going in and slowing the lungs and going down because we've got water accumulation. We need to dry and lower. Therefore, Ma Huang Guizhi Banxia Gancao, as opposed to Xingren Gancao. But it's a Ma Huang Tang variation. It's a Ma Huang Tang formula. Do we have Guizhi Tang again? Well, I mean, I saw Guizhi Shao Yao Gancao, so I mean, right away I'm getting the flag of like, oh, do I see a variation in here? Okay, I've got Guizhi, I've got Shao Yao. Do I have ginger? Ganjiang, even warmer, right? I'm going all the way down because I just described that mechanism of the fire, and the Mingmen fire hits the kidneys, and then the kidneys, and all of these things. We've got to figure out how to get the qi to work. And he's going to have some really interesting thing about the kidney qi in Cheng Wuji's description. And do we have dates? Do we have our zao in here? No. Instead, we have Xixin. And now we need to think, is it because we've switched them, that Xixin is going to do something that the Dazao doesn't? Or is Dazao inappropriate in this situation? And Dazao is inappropriate in this situation because Dazao is sweet and sticky if you chop it up. And really, as Julianne's been saying, it goes in and it creates a line. Nothing will go through and enter further into the body. The pernicious will hit this sweet fullness and go, ah, and the body will be like, ha. The problem is, we have a problem of up to low, lungs to kidney, fire to fire. We have to figure out how to get water metabolism to go. And so if we choose an herb sequence in there that creates stuck in the middle, that nothing can go through, we're basically, it's like moving all of your furniture to the middle of your room on the first floor and then deciding to move your furniture out from the second floor through that to outside. It's just this ton of stuff in the way. And so that's taken out, and we put in Xixin. And Xixin is that acrid, and it's warm, and it's going to go whoosh. What I like about Xixin is that there's some herbs, Ma Huang, Xixin, Fuzi, and they're all basically stimulators of yang in what they do. They're warm, they're acrid, they're powerful herbs in their way. And so Xixin is a really good herb that way. And at some point, I'm going to do the video of herbs you should not take or in certain doses. And then I will take them on film and be like, it's like Johnny Knoxville takes herbs. All right? So we've got Xixin. And Xixin today, you'll say that like in the last 100 years, they'll say, 不过钱, not more than 3 grams. You can't prescribe unless you have permission in the hospital and you have a PhD or doctorate level of Chinese medicine. You cannot prescribe more than 1 gram of Xixin. If you as a foreigner would be in China and say, oh, I want to buy some Xixin to take home since it's illegal in the United States, not that I'm saying you should do that, they'd look at you and be like, no, we're not selling it to you. And yet, it's an upper herb in the Shandong Bancao. So, therefore, Shandong Bancao must be unscientific and old-fashioned and should be thrown out as a classic and not read again. No. But, if we look at our grammage, based on what the Shang Han really is, it's 3 liang. We're prescribing 45 grams of Xixin. And you can't give more than 1 right now in the hospital without specific permission.
Even at 3 grams a liang, you're prescribing
9 grams. And so then we have to ask, what's going on here? And you'll have to wait for that video that will answer that question for you. I will tell you that I have no problems prescribing 9 to 12 grams of Xixin with pneumonia. And should I have someone who is frothing pneumonia and going to be dead tomorrow, you better believe they're going to get the full dose. But 3, because of course, well, here you can't, but 9 is what it takes, along with everything else in here, to treat walking pneumonia and in 24 hours have it very different, in my opinion. But there's our Xixin, which is such the opposite function of Dazao in a formula. I mean, it's the exact opposite. Dazao is going to sweet and go in the middle, and Xixin is going to go stronger. So there we have our formula, and we're looking at, once again, we've got Ma Huang variation, Guizhi variation, with something removed that would be negative. Earlier we removed Baishao in a certain situation, all of these things when we didn't want something. And so start seeing that as opposed to thinking it's a different formula. It's not a different formula. There are very few formulas in the Shang Han. There's a whole lot of modifications on those few formulas.